Hello everyone. Today we will know about the plasma membrane or cell membrane. So what is the cell membrane or the plasma membrane? First of all cell must have a plasma membrane or the cell membrane. Look at this structure. It is a cell. What is the cell membrane? That means the outermost boundary or the outermost structure of the cell is called as the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. So first of all, in the 1950, the electron microscope was discovered. So after the electron microscope discovery, then only the discovery of the plasma membrane was done. And the first discovery of the plasma membrane was done in the cell that is called as the RBC, or the red blood cell. That means in the RBC, the first analysis of the cell membrane was done. So now look at this structure. This is the cell membrane structure. So if I zoom this portion, it looks like this. That means actually the plasma membrane is not a single layer structure. It is a two layer structure. This is the one layer. This is the second layer. What is called as the leaflet. Leaflet. That means two leaflet. This is the one leaflet. This is the second leaflet, or it is called as the one layer or second layer. So always that's why the cell membrane is double membrane structure. So now come to the structure of the plasma membrane. What is the constituents of the plasma membrane? So in the plasma membrane, mainly the lipid and protein are present. Okay. So this structure is called as the lipid. This is the one structure. This is the one lipid. This is another lipid. This is third lipid. So now come to the what is the structure of the actual lipid. The one lipid structure is looked like this. That means it has two segments. One is called as the head, or it is called as the head part, and it is called as the tail part. So head part always the hydrophilic. What is the hydrophilic? The structure which always wants to interact with the water molecule is called as the hydrophilic. So what is the tail? Tail is the hydrophobic structure. Hydrophobic structure. That means it is the same structure in which both hydrophobic and the hydrophilic structure are present. So that's why the lipid is called as the amphipathic molecule. Amphipathic molecule. So what is the amphipathic molecule? That means any structure which contains both hydrophilic as well as hydrophobic structure, that is called as the amphipathic molecule. So now in the lipid, in the head part, it contains glycerol along with phosphate. So this is the head part. And in the tail part, this is the one tail, this is the another tail. So what is this tail part? These are called as the fatty acid. So now what is the fatty acid? Fatty acid is simply the chain of the hydrocarbons, and at the last part COOH group is attached. So this is called as the fatty acid. The fatty acid can be two types. One is called as the saturated fatty acid, and another is the unsaturated fatty acid. So what is the saturated fatty acid? That means in the fatty acid, if all the bonds are the single bond, then it is called as the saturated fatty acid. So this type of the structure of the fatty acid is called as the saturated fatty acid. So now look at what is the unsaturated fatty acid. That means in the fatty acid, if at least one double bond is present, or more than one double bond is present, then it is called as the unsaturated fatty acid. Okay, so now you know what is the saturated fatty acid, what is the unsaturated fatty acid. So look at the structure of the, so what is the lipid? The lipid is the at the head part, the glycerol and the phosphate. Look at the structure. This is the glycerol structure, this is the phosphate structure, and this is the tail. So tail means it is the only the fatty acid. So lipid means glycerol, phosphate plus fatty acid. So one is the saturated fatty acid, another is the unsaturated fatty acid. The saturated fatty acid, it actually present like this, that means in a straight line structure. But in the unsaturated fatty acid, because of the presence of the double bond structure, it bends somewhere, it bends, or it is called as a kink, K-I-N-K, kink. So what is the kink? That means simply the bending. That means if the saturated fatty acid is present in the lipid, then it looks like this. If one unsaturated fatty acid is present, then it looks like this, or it is designated as this. So always normally in the membrane, the lipid contains one unsaturated fatty acid. So that's why if we look at the book, then it looks like this. That means one tail is bending like this. Here looks like this. One is simple straight, another is bending. Why it is bending? It is called as a kink. That means in that area a double bond structure is present and the whole fatty acid is unsaturated fatty acid. Okay, so plasma membrane contains protein plus lipid. So actually which type of the lipid is present? So normally, or in the plasma membrane, the lipid is phospholipid. Phospholipid. What is the phospholipid? That means the lipid in which the head part contains a phosphate group. Here the PO4, a phosphate group is present. That's why it is called as a phospholipid. Okay. So always in the plasma membrane, the lipid is the phospholipid, and another lipid is present. That is called as the sterol. So what is the sterol? Sterol is a subgroup of steroid. Subgroup of steroid, or the group, one of the group of the steroid is called as the sterol. So different types of the sterol are present in different organisms. For example, in the animal, the sterol is present, that is called as the cholesterol. In the plant, the sterol is present in the plant, is called as the phytosterol. In the fungi, the sterol is called as the mycosterol. So in different organisms, different types of the sterols are present. So always in the plasma membrane structure, the lipid is present, and which type of the lipid? One is the phospholipid, another is the sterol. So two types of the lipid are present in the plasma membrane. So now come to the protein. Along with the lipid, some proteins are present here. In between that, some proteins are present. So this is all about the structure of the plasma membrane. So now come to the models of plasma membrane. So what is the models of the plasma membrane? That means the plasma membrane, or what are the sequence of the discovery of the plasma membrane. The first model was discovered and it was called as lipid and lipid bilayer model. It was discovered in 1925. Okay, and it was discovered by Gotter and Grendel. Gotter and Grendel. So what is the lipid and the lipid bilayer structure? This structure is called as the lipid and lipid bilayer model, which was discovered in 1925 by Gotter and the Grendel. What is the lipid and the lipid bilayer? So Gotter and the Grendel, they speculated at that time that only the lipid are present in the plasma membrane. This is the one layer, that is the lipid layer. This is the another lipid layer. That means there is no protein, there is no carbohydrate, only the lipid are present according to that model, which is wrong. But at that time, actually it was a first model. So that's why they thought that it may contains only the lipid layer. That's why it is called the lipid and the lipid bilayer. That means it is a bilayer structure, and the always means in all areas lipid are only present. That means no protein, no carbohydrate is present in that plasma membrane. So the second model is called as sandwich model. Sandwich model. It was discovered in 1935 by Danieli and Devsa. So what is the sandwich model? It is the sandwich model. This type of the structure is called as the sandwich model, which was discovered in 1935. So according to this model, here at the outer side the protein is present. Here it is the one protein layer, here it is the one protein layer, and then the inside the lipid layer is present. That means it is called as a sandwich model. That means the lipids are sandwiched by the two protein layers. That means inside the lipid is present, and this lipid layer is sandwiched by protein. That means the outer here the protein, here it is the also the outer protein. That means two proteins, this sandwich the lipid structure. So this is the second model. The third model is called as unit membrane model. Unit membrane model, and it was discovered in 1953. And I have already told that the first electron microscope was discovered in 1950. So, and it was discovered by 1953. That means it is the first model which was discovered after the discovery of the electron microscope. So that is called the unit membrane model, and it was discovered by Robertson. Okay. So what is the unit membrane model? According to that, here the protein layer, this is the unit membrane model. So according to that, the protein layer, it contains protein and lipid according to this model, and the protein is asymmetric. That means not same in the both layer. That means at the outer layer, look at this structure, it is a thick, and at the inner layer, this is the thin structure. The thin layer of the protein is present, and inside it the lipid is present according to this model. So that is called the unit membrane model. So the fourth one is most important, that is called as the fluid mosaic model. Fluid mosaic model, and it was discovered in 1972 by Singer and Nicholson. Okay. So please note that the fluid mosaic model, which was discovered in 1972 it is the most accepted theory. It is the most accepted theory of the plasma membrane. That means even nowadays we also accept the fluid mosaic model. It is the latest model and it was accepted only about the plasma membrane structure. So that's why if it in the exam, if it will be asked that which is the most accepted theory or which is the accepted theory or which is the latest theory about the plasma membrane model, and the answer will be the fluid mosaic model, and it was discovered by Singer and the Nicholson, and this is the structure of the fluid mosaic model. That means nowadays whatever we know about the plasma membrane, it is according to the fluid mosaic model. So now come to the extensive study about the fluid mosaic model. So this is the fluid mosaic model. According to that, the plasma membrane contains lipid plus protein plus carbohydrate. Okay. So what type of the lipid are present? One is called as the phospholipid. Another is called as the sterol. So now look at the structure. This is the one layer of the one leaflet. This is the another leaflet. So this structure is called as the lipid structure, and this orange color structure, it is called as the phospholipid. Okay. So the yellow color structure or this structure or here this structure is called as the sterol. Here it is called as the cholesterol. Why it is called as the cholesterol? Because it is the animal cell. This is the animal cell. Why? Because in the animal, the sterol is called as the cholesterol. If it is the plant, the sterol is the phytosterol. If it is the fungi, the sterol is called as the mycosterol. So one is the phospholipid and the sterol. So if in the exam it will be asked that what are the types of the lipid present in the plasma membrane, and it is called as the simply phospholipid and the sterol. And what is the function of the sterol? It helps in the fluidity of the plasma membrane. Fluidity of plasma membrane. Okay. So this is the phospholipid. Phospholipid, that means this type of the structure is called as the phospholipid. One is called as the head part, and it is the hydrophilic, and it is the tail part, and it is the hydrophobic. Now, what do you think that why the head part is called as the hydrophilic, or why the head part is hydrophilic and why the tail part is hydrophobic? Look at the structure. Let's say this is the cell and this is the membrane of the structure. So that means it looks like this. That means here one is the head part, here at the outer side the head part is present, and then the inside it or the middle like this, here the hydrophobic group or the hydrophobic tail group is present. But why? Always in the cell, let's say this is the one cell, this is the another cell, this is the another cell, this is called as the extracellular matrix. Extracellular matrix. And the inside it or the inside of the cell is called as the cytosol. So always in the extracellular matrix of the cytosol, the watery condition the watery solution is present. That means the cytosol is simply the watery condition. So that's why the inside the water molecule, let's say water molecule, not water, the watery solution or the hydrophilic solution is present. At the outside also, this is called the extracellular matrix. Here also the hydrophilic or the watery molecules are present. So that's why the head part is hydrophilic, so that it can interact with the water molecule. So always the hydrophilic, they want to interact with the water molecule. And what is the hydrophobic? They always want to away from the water molecule. So that's why at the middle part, here the hydrophobic or the tail part is present. At the outer side or the inner side, always the head part is present, so that it can interact with the water molecule. And in the middle or the core part, it doesn't want to interact with the water molecules. So that's why they always want to away from the water molecules. That's why they are present at the inside of the cell. So this is the phospholipid. This is the sterol, which helps in the fluidity of the plasma membrane. So another type of the lipid is also present, that is called as the glycolipid. Glycolipid. So now So one is the lipid part. So in the lipid part, one is the phospholipid, another is the sterol, another is the glycolipid. What is the glycolipid? We will know after some time. Okay, this is the lipid part. So in the plasma membrane, lipid plus protein is also present. So what is the protein? So here the blue color structure is called as the protein. Here it is the one protein, here another protein, here the another protein. So the proteins are two types. One is called as the peripheral, another is called as the integral. The peripheral is also called as the extrinsic protein, or the integral protein is also called as the intrinsic protein. So what is the extrinsic, what is the intrinsic protein? So extrinsic now, or the peripheral, as the name suggests, that means it is only present at the periphery. Look at the structure of the protein. This is present only at the outer area of the lipid, and this is called as the extrinsic of the peripheral. So what is the integral? That means it must have gone to the core of the plasma membrane. So look at the structure. It already buried in the core of the plasma membrane. That's why it is the integral or the intrinsic protein, and this is called as the peripheral or extrinsic protein. Okay, so because the peripheral protein, they are present only at the outer side, it binds the lipid membrane very loosely bound. And integral protein, because it is already buried to the middle of the bilayer, it is strongly bound to the lipid bilayer. Okay, so this is the structure of the lipid. Another lipid, okay, one is the peripheral, another is integral. Some protein like this is also a protein. It already present at the inside and the outside. That means it already buried whole part of the lipid bilayer, and this type of the protein is called as the transmembrane protein. Transmembrane protein. So normally three types of the protein are present. One is the peripheral, which is present at the just outside at the periphery of the lipid bilayer. One is the integral, that means it is already present near the core of the plasma membrane. Another is the transmembrane, which buried along the plasma membrane, that is called the transmembrane protein. So another structure is called as the carbohydrate. Carbohydrate. So the carbohydrate look like this type of the protein, this type of the carbohydrate. Carbohydrate are simply two types. One is called as the glycoprotein. Another is the glycolipid, which is already I have told. So what is the glycoprotein? What is the glycolipid? So always carbohydrate always present at the outer side. That means either this side or this side. It is not present at the middle of the plasma membrane. And carbohydrate is only present by binding either the protein or the lipid. So glyco means carbohydrate, and the protein means protein. Here it is the glyco means carbohydrate or carb, the lipid. So that means some carbohydrate binds to protein and it is called as a glycoprotein, and some carbohydrate are present by binding with the lipid, and this is called as the glycolipid structure. Look at this structure. This is called as the glycoprotein. That means this is a protein. To this protein a carbohydrate group is attached, and this carbohydrate is called as the glycoprotein. And some protein are present or bound to the lipid structure, and that is called the glycolipid structure. So in summary, in the plasma membrane, lipid plus protein plus carbohydrate are present. Then the lipid, one is the phospholipid and the sterol, they are present in the plasma membrane. Another is the glycolipid is present, which is present at the outer side by binding with the carbohydrate. Another is the protein. There are three types of the protein. One is the peripheral protein, which is present at the periphery. Another is the integral, which is buried in the integral part of the plasma membrane. Another is the transmembrane, that means it already buried to the whole plasma membrane structure, that is called the transmembrane protein structure. Another is called the carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is present only at the outer side by binding with the lipid and the protein. If it is bind to the protein, then it is called as the glycoprotein. If it is bound to the lipid, then it is called as the glycolipid. So this is all about the plasma membrane structure. So now in some different cell, different types of the composition of the lipid and the protein and the carbohydrate present. And the exam always asked what are the constituents or the composition of the lipid and the protein and the carbohydrate present in the RBC. Why it is asked in the RBC? Because the first discovery of the plasma membrane was done in the RBC. So in the RBC, the 52% lipid are present, 52% protein are present, 40% lipid are present, and 10% carbohydrate are present. Okay, so this is the structure of the lipid bilayer. So one is called as the, why it is called the fluid mosaic model. The structure is called as the fluid mosaic model. One is fluid, another is the mosaic. Mosaic means like the tiles. The mosaic, the fluid is due to the lipid structure, and the mosaic is due to the protein plus sterol. What is the mosaic? That means like the tile structure. If in the house, then the tile house, the tiles are present at the out like this. So this is called the mosaic. Here also, the lipid and the protein and the sterol are present like the mosaic model. That's why it is called the mosaic. And what it is called the fluid, and the fluid is due to the lipid. Why it is called the fluid? That means the plasma membrane is not very strong or not very hard or not very rigid. It is very, very soft. Okay. So unlike the cell wall is very hard or the very rigid, which is present at the plant cell. That means in the plant cell, this is the plant cell, this is the plasma membrane, and outer side of the plasma membrane another layer is present, and it is called as the cell wall. The cell wall is very hard, but the plasma membrane is not very hard. It is a fluid-like structure or the very soft. Why it is called as a fluid-like structure? Because it always rotates around each other. That means it is not fixed. That means let us say this is the lipid bilayer structure. It is always not fixed. It is always in a movement like structure. That means always it is moving. The structure is always moving, and that's why it is called the fluid structure. So why or how the fluid or how the lipid is moved? Lipid moves by two methods. One is called as the flip flop, another is called as the lateral movement. If movement of the lipid, there are two types of the movement of the lipid. One is called as the flip flop, another is the lateral movement. What is the flip flop? Look at the structure. If this lipid, it comes to this layer, and this lipid comes to this layer, this is called as the flip flop movement. That means from the one leaflet to another leaflet, or from one layer to another layer, then it is called as a flip flop, or simply it is a vertical movement. That means from one leaflet to another leaflet. What is the lateral movement? That means if this lipid, it comes to here, and here it comes to here, then only it is called as the lateral movement or the horizontal movement. So always in the plasma membrane, it is not fixed. They move always around each other. So that's why the lateral movement of the protein, lateral movement of the lipid, it is responsible for the fluidity of the plasma membrane, along with the cholesterol. Previously we have already studied about the sterol. That means the sterol, it maintains the fluidity of the plasma membrane. For the lateral movement of the lipid, it is responsible for the fluidity of the plasma membrane. So along like the lipid, the protein, let us say in the inside some protein are present. The protein are also moved, but only in the lateral movement. That means the protein can move only laterally. That means in one leaflet only, but it cannot move like the flip flop. That means the protein cannot go from the one layer to another layer, but the lipid can. So lipid can move from the flip flop or the lateral movement. That means lipid can move horizontally as well as vertically, but the protein can be moved by the laterally. That means in same leaflet or the same layer, it can go or it can move, but in the horizontally, in the vertically, they cannot move. So this is the movement of the protein in the lipid. So now come to the function of the plasma membrane. What is the function of the plasma membrane? So what is the function of plasma membrane? One of the function is called as the cell growth. Cell growth. Cell growth means, let's say this is a one cell, it grows like this. Why? Because the plasma membrane is fluid, not hard. Let's say this is, if it is the hard like cell wall, then the growth of the cell cannot be done. So that's why one of the function of the plasma membrane is the cell growth, another is cell division. Cell division. Cell division means one cell divides to two cells, or the mitosis and the meiosis you will know about after some time. So the mitosis, the meiosis, two types of the cell division is present in the cell, and the cell division is also due to the plasma membrane. Another is endocytosis. Endocytosis. What is the endocytosis? Let's say this is the cell. Some molecule is present outside the cell. It enters into the cell and it is called as the endocytosis, or the engulfment of the cell, or engulfment of the molecule by the cell is called as the endocytosis, and it is also done by the plasma membrane because the plasma membrane is fluid or the soft. And the fourth one is intercellular junction, formation of intercellular junction. What is the intercellular junction? Let's say this is the one cell, this is the another cell, this is the another cell. So here the cell junction, the cell interaction is also helped by the plasma membrane. This is the function of the plasma membrane.